What are the features of a true SDX Mini HF radio? And can you set up an effective Go kit with one? Hey, let's find out next on AA3K on the Go. Oh, about 2 years ago, a friend of mine in Michigan, whose club was putting together a group buy of true SDX HF radios, asked if I wanted to get in on it, and I said absolutely. I received my kit right around date and time last year, and assembled the analog board and did what surface mount soldering I needed to do on the digital board. And when I put it on the air, I really was not receiving anything. And carefully inspecting my surface mount soldering, which I have to admit is not the best in the world, though it wasn't the prettiest, I did not see any missing connections, any shorted connections or anything like that. And I suspect that there is another issue somewhere in the board and really didn't have time to debug it. I went through DL2MAN's website and his list of approved vendors of the true SDX and decided to order one. And I'll have all of that information in the description, including which of the vendors I ordered it from. DL2MAN and PE1NNZ have a limited list of approved manufacturers of their radio, and all of the manufacturers have met their quality standards and do produce good quality true SDXs for sale. So I went ahead and ordered one of the radios, received it, put it on the air, and other than having to load the firmware into the radio and adjust the reference frequencies so that the radio's transmit frequency and receive frequencies were on the desired frequencies, I found it to be a good little performer. Personally, I do like my 817, my Yaesu FT817 as a better radio, but this has so many features in a radio that is barely 5 ounces, barely bigger than a thick deck of playing cards, and it is a software-defined radio. You can't beat that for about $138 from the vendor that I bought it with, plus shipping, of course, from China. So I'm going to go over the various features in this radio and just show you how much of a radio you can get as your first portable radio, as your only radio for maybe playing HF radio, that you can use for POTA, SOTA, just playing in your backyard, just playing in some park somewhere that may not be an official POTA park or such. This is actually a surprisingly capable radio, again, for under $150. So stick with me and we'll go through the various features of this radio, and I'll give you a little bit more rundown of how I've put it to use. Okay, here we have my true SDX radio, and yes, it is about the size of a pack of playing cards, but about twice as thick, not counting the knob. Overall, the radio weighs 4.9 ounces or 138 grams. Its length is 3.5 inches, not including the SMA connector or the adapter that's on here. With this SMA to B and C adapter, it is 4 3/8 inches wide. The depth of the radio is 2 5/8 inches, and its height is 1 1/8 inches, not including the knob, and with the knob it's 2 inches. I have seen some people cut down the shaft of the encoder knob and put on a much shorter knob, but wider, with a little dimple in it so you can get your finger in to spin it. Right now, I have no plans to make that modification. I really don't want to risk damaging the encoder by cutting the shaft. But what the future holds, I do not know. This sweep that you're seeing on the display is due to the camera's refresh rate or shutter rate as compared to the refresh rate on the display. The display itself, when viewed, is solid with no problems, except maybe in bright sunlight it does get a little bit washed out. This radio was designed by Manuel, DL2MAN, and Guido, PE1NNZ. And they have done an absolutely amazing job. And the processor within this radio is in the AT Mega family. It's an 8-bit processor. It's part of that family is also used in the Arduino processors. And the amount of performance that they have pulled out of an 8-bit processor is amazing. I don't know the clock rate that it is running at, but that does make a big difference. I have done more than my share of programming on 8-bit processors, and I will tell you, having enough horsepower to get things done was always a problem with the processors that I used. This particular radio is built for 80, 60, 40, 30, and 20 meters. It has full band coverage in those bands. By changing the filters within the radio, you can get it to operate on 10, 12, 15, 17, or 20 meters. However, the performance will suffer. The radio is designed towards the low end, or I should say the low bands. You can build a classic version of this, which does not have any walk bands, and those are 10, 15, 20, 40, and 80 meters. And through a setting in the menu system, you tell the radio what bands to operate on. The radio is mainly menu driven. It has obviously a button to bring up the menus. You have the encoder to change frequencies and other settings such as volume or options within the menus. You can click and change what value that you're changing. In this case, I'm now changing the tens of hertz. Click it again and I'll change the megahertz value. Click it again, I'll go to the 100 kilohertz. 1 kilohertz in this case. I may have pressed it twice there. And in all cases, you may not see it on the display here. There is a tiny little tick mark next to the digit that's going to change when you adjust the encoder here. Step tuning like this, I have to admit, is not my favorite thing. I really much prefer a smooth flowing VFO knob, but I understand the limitations of getting an encoder that will work in such a small package as this radio. So the QMX radios from QRP Labs have a similar encoding system with their VFO knob, and I actually do have a QCX for 40 meters, and hopefully I'll review that here someday also. The displays on these units come in basically two types, I guess based upon availability of the parts, and if you're having the radio pre-built or pre-assembled for you, what parts they use or what parts come in the kit of assembly. Some radios, and the one that I received through my friend's club, are monochrome, basically a very light gray on a dark background. In this case, this display has a film over the same display, so it makes some of the numbers show up in blue and some show up in yellow. But those are fixed. There is no adjustment within that display. I do have an Arduino set that I play with every now and then for stuff, and a display unit. And the display unit is the same way. You cannot adjust the color based upon the position of the screen. It determines whether you get blue or yellow. And personally, I do like the blue and yellow combination a bit better. Being that this display can get washed out in sunlight, I don't think whether it's the multicolor display or the monochrome display, it will make much difference. So, what features does this radio have? Honestly, I'm completely and totally amazed at how many features this radio has. It has a very limited amount of user interface controls, a menu button to bring up its menu system, select what item you want to change, and then save that item and get back out of the menu. Similarly, you can select menu, select an item that you're changing. In this case, it would be volume. You see the greater than symbol, and then I can adjust the volume. Have no antenna hooked up, so it's not picking up anything. Pressing enter will save it also and keep you in the menu system. As for features, obviously you can adjust volume, and there's a quick way to adjust volume where you do not have to go into the menu system to do so, and I'll show you that in a moment. But you have volume, you do have mode, so this radio is capable of transmitting and receiving on CW, SSB, single sideband, FM, and AM. And that all of those features are in a radio under $150 and in barely 5 ounces and such is really amazing. I've just done a rudimentary test on phone, transmitting from here and having a voice recorder set up at my home station antenna, and it sounded absolutely fine using the built-in microphone that the radio has. And you can plug in an external microphone and such, but I have not built one yet. As you can see, the radio has a built-in speaker, and Manuel and Guido do admit that the speaker was a bit of a last-minute addition to the radio design. in that they found one that would fit within the design with minimal modifications. But that speaker is very easily overdriven. If you go past a volume level of this radio, past 8, you're going to find that the radio is typically going to squeal on you. Handy if you need it real quick in the field, but I have always used this radio with earbuds. You can set the filter bandwidth. So as I most often use this radio just on CW, I have it set to 500 Hertz, but you can go down to as low as 50 Hertz and all the way up to 4 kilohertz, which is particularly useful if you're running voice modes such as FM. As I mentioned, you can select what band you want to operate the radio on. This radio is built to operate on what they call the standard bands. So I have 80 meters, 60 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, and 20 meters. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear the relays clicking as it's switching in the different band segments. And to build this radio for other bands, you would just need to rewind different toroids. I should say, you need to rewind the toroids or build a separate RF board. Build a separate filter board with the different windings on it to get the frequencies. I have only operated this radio on 20 and 40 meters in CW, and it has performed very well on those bands. You do have a tune rate, so this is where you can select through the menu system whether you want to change the 10, 100, 1 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz, 100 kilohertz, megahertz setting, or you can actually do so by just clicking on the radio when it is in the VFO display. And there's a tiny little pip next to the digit that will change. Kind of hard to see until you get close on it. In my case, I do need to use reading glasses to be able to see that. It does have the choice of 2 VFOs, a VFO and VFO-B. I have not determined if the radio actually supports split operation, that you could listen on one frequency and transmit on another frequency. The overall program memory for this radio is getting quite full. Guido has had to do some tricks and some pulling out dead code in order to make space for new features. I am running the latest beta version of this software, version 2.00X, and that is the most recently distributed software or available software firmware for this radio, and that was available in early 2024. And the capabilities of the radio are stupendous with that version. I don't know much more that they can put in it. One really interesting thing that they added, that the radio does support a spectrum display. Now, I don't actually have an antenna hooked up to it, but you can see little spikes of energy being detected. It will mute the audio when you do so, and you can adjust the spectrum display in real time by changing the VFO encoder knob, but the audio will come back, but definitely not be of the same quality as when the radio is operating in normal mode. And the issue with the my call sign not coming back up on the display is a known issue, and hopefully there'll be a workaround published for it, or they will correct that in the next release of software. Additionally, this radio really doesn't have an on-off switch. To turn it off, pull the power. To turn it back on, you apply the power. And there's my call sign back, and that can be programmed in there. You can update this radio. You can buy the proper programmer, or you can program a Arduino unit and plugging in. Where is it? I didn't punch out the holes. I have to open it up. There's a side connector of 6 pins where you connect it, and the Arduino will download the software and update the unit. As I said, the latest software is 2.00X, and it has been running very well for field use. The menus do default back to volume as the first place. Actually, no, I'm sorry. That's because I power cycled it. Otherwise, it would have stayed on the last setting there. We do have an RIT that you can turn on, and particularly if you're running stations, say in POTA SOTA or some other field event like that, where you can adjust the receive frequency a little bit to take care of stations that are off frequency. Built-in AGC, and I usually leave that on to help protect my ears. I've lost enough hearing in life. Noise reduction really operates more like squelch. It basically, if the signal, as you go up and up, it's like increasing squelch, and if the signal isn't past a certain point, the radio will mute. So I have just typically left it at 0 and just listened to the bands au naturel. My HF Go kit that I have for this radio has a very compact end-fed half-wave antenna. So right now I am limited with that antenna to 10, 15, 20, and 40, and this radio only, of those bands, this radio will only do 20 and 40. The antenna is self-resonant on that, and I just kind of rely on being in a quiet area so I don't get blown out by any local noise. You can adjust how you want the S meter to display. You can turn it off. It's showing dBm or S units. I leave it in S units so I can just quickly refer to it when giving my report back. And you can show forward power and SWR. Unfortunately, that's only while in CW mode. You can show forward power and reflected power. Forward power only, I should say power output only, and power output and radio power supply voltage. But I just leave that in forward SWR mode. And as I just want to be able to grab my paddles and key, I leave it in semi-QSK mode, so it'll just, the radio will instantly go into transmit when I want to send. This radio has a built-in keyer and built-in CW memories, actually 6 CW memories to be exact, so I have that set at 20 words a minute. And I haven't looked for the upper end of it, but personally I really don't go higher than 28 words a minute. That's really tops me out for receiving. Maybe I can handle 30 words a minute, especially on call signs that I know. It does support iambic A and B modes. I use the B mode. And you can set this also for a straight key and just plug the straight key into the key jack there. Oh, as for external connections, you have a connection to key a power amplifier. Obviously audio to go to an external speaker or earbuds, which is the case of what I use, and then the microphone and your key input. And you have menu, enter, and if you're using, say, particularly if you're using the built-in microphone here, you got your PTT button right there. And if you have your paddles wired backwards, or you like a paddle to be wired backwards, you can take care of that here within the radio by just turning on the keyer swap. And if you really want to use Vox mode, built-in Vox mode. Let's see, what do we have here? Noise gate. I have to admit I'm not particularly familiar with that. I think that helps in determining where the signals are when this radio does CW decode. Yes, amazingly, it has a CW decoder in it. It's very small. You can see one letter there, a T right now on the bottom of the display, but handy to glance over if you miss a letter of a call sign going by. Hopefully it's been decoded correctly. CW has, even in this day, has been a challenge for computer decoding due to its very length setting of the dots and dashes, and especially if somebody's sending with a straight key, you don't get consistent dot and dash spacing ratio. Let's see, we have a transmitter drive. You can set this to how much power, if you want to move it way back and conserve on battery and power and such. I've left this pretty much at the default of 4, and it's been working 5. And I'm getting between 3 to 5 watts out from the radio, depending upon what band I am on. It does have a transmit delay if you need the radio to key and then not send RF for a moment, say particularly with a power amplifier, you can set it up there, but I have that set at 0 because currently I have no plans to add a power amplifier. If I want to use more power, I'll bring my ICOM 7300, and if I just want less than 100 watts but more than 5 watts, I'll just turn down its output power. Interval, so in this case I have it set for 8 seconds between automatically calling CQ messages, so I can listen for a response, and then when I send something it'll stop sending the CQ message. And you have 6 CQ message memories, and one of these memories I did program for my trip to Italy, and I did program in my call sign, well I should say I0 or I5, depending upon what area of Italy I was hoping to operate in, stroke AA3K with my, and the rest of my call sign. So I would only have to hit a button to get it to send CQ. And having built a radio or something to send CW, especially CQ or in voice, CQ and voice, automatically is a godsend to operating radios and calling in the field. Sometimes you end up calling quite a bit just to get one contact, and that saves you from getting tired, from your voice getting hoarse, from your keying getting sloppy. Really makes a big difference in my opinion. You can adjust the bias of the amplifier transistors within here. That's the default value, and I've left it at that. Actually, in particular, that's the default value for the particular transistors or FETs that are in this radio. There's a couple of choices the radio can be built with, and DL2MAN and PE1NNZ do list what the default values are for the various devices that are options to build the radio with. The reference frequency allows you to adjust the radio to have its transmit and receive frequencies right on the indicated display. Every radio, every crystal in these radios is just a little bit different, and that's let you compensate. And what I did is I just set this in straight mode, transmitted, and adjusted until on my home station spectrum monitor I saw the RF envelope being right at the frequency that that receiver was set to. And if I'm off 10 hertz, I'm off 10 hertz, but everything has been fine. And I've done 2 parks on the air activations with this radio, and both of the times on the frequencies I've spotted myself on, I've had no problem receiving people. They were all within a couple of tens of hertz of my frequency, so I could not complain. This R shunt is used to determine the forward and reflected power, and you just put the value in here, and this is the default value that the radio is built with. But if you need to change that value, you can adjust in here, and it will adjust the calculations for the display. This low pass filter configuration is what tells the radio what set of bands it's operating with. In this case, it's the low bands, classic 80, 60, 40, 30, and 20 meters. If you can go to the high band, or it has the classic bands with no walk. But as the radio filters are built for low, I leave it there. And finally, this is the firmware version that's installed in the radio. In this case, it's 2.00x. It's still considered a beta release. But it has been stable at least since the beginning of 2024. I don't know when DL2MAN and PE1NNZ are going to say that this is a finalized release. And if I want to update the radio, I do have to take it out of the case. I didn't punch open the spot where the side connector, the ICP connector is, and hook it up to my Arduino, which is programmed as a programmer for the chip in here, which is a simple download the development package for the Arduino, download the download the sketch, which defines the programmer, and then you just load in the file you want to go, set it all up, enable this thing to go into reprogram mode, and away you go. In a few minutes, this firmware will be updated. And believe it or not, just being able to move from this 9.7 menu to the 1.1 menu, that's actually a relatively recent feature. Previously, you would have to go all the way around. Okay, as for the user interface of the radio, it is kind of limited, and most of these buttons do triple, even quad duty to get something done. Menu will bring up the menu for the radio itself. But if you press and hold it, you'll get the spectrum display. There is probably a double tap feature on it, which I'm forgetting at the moment. And holding down enter will bring up the RIT setting. Let me just go back to 7 megahertz here. Oh, pressing the enter button will change the operating mode. So there we have CW, lowest sideband, upper sideband, back to CW, and through the menu you can get to FM and AM. If you hold down the encoder and you twist it, you'll be able to adjust the volume in real time. And again, going over, doesn't sound too bad here, but if we switch, you can hear a bit of a whine there, and if there's active signals, that whine actually gets significantly worse. And there it is, it's even worse in upper sideband. So it does much better on earbuds, or if you use an external speaker, especially an external powered speaker. instead of just using the built-in speaker. But in a pinch, you have a speaker available to you. So, and if you're holding down the menu button, you can tune where the spectrum scope is, and that will change the receive frequency also of the radio in general. You can quote, turn the radio off by pressing this and turning the volume all the way down to -1. The radio display will go off. I do not think the radio truly shuts down its operation, and while testing that feature, I have noticed that after about 10-15 seconds, the radio display came back on. Not a big deal, because if I'm putting the radio away, I will be pulling the plug here from it. Double click on the enter button will change the filter bandwidth, or you can go back through the menu system, and a double long press will change A or B for the VFO. But majority of the radio's features are done through the menu system, which, you know, most of those things are set at once and pretty much forget it and leave it as that. You can see right now the radio is decoding T's in CW mode. Again, that's handy if you need to glance over and check what you copied as a call sign or such, and because you missed it, instead of having to ask for a repeat. Handy in the field, and can be a crutch for someone who's not great at CW, but believe it or not, that's to a large degree using a decoder is how I've really learned to receive CW and decode it in my head. What do I think of the true SDX HF radio? It's a winner. Is it the absolute best software-defined radio you can buy? Is it the absolute best QRP radio that you can buy? Honestly, I think my Yaesu FT817 is a better radio overall. It just feels more like a radio. It's a little bit smoother in its tuning, in that you don't have to go step tuning and such. But the Yaesu FT817 is over 25 years old in its design. It is a pure analog radio. It is not a software-defined radio as this is. While the FT817 did break amazing new ground in the QRP world for a HF to daylight capable radio, or at least HF 6 meters, 2 meters and 440 capable radio, and this is much more limited in its transmit frequencies. The Yaesu FT817 is at least 4 times the size of this, and a bit more power hungry and such than this radio. But this is still a very good radio. I have used it successfully in my backyard, and as I have said, on 2 Parks on the Air activations. And the surprise of one of those activations is when a Swedish station called me back. So my 5 watts on a end-fed half-wave wire propped up into a tree on a fishing pole, a long fishing pole, made its way all the way across the Atlantic to Sweden and back. You can't complain about that. The whole Go kit that I built around this radio is only 2 or 3 pounds. I'll have to get you an updated weight, as I've added a couple of items to this kit. But, you know, I currently been keeping it in the trunk of my car, hoping at some time at lunchtime at work I'll be able to get off and go find a tree, throw up the wire and make a contact or two. Or right after work, run to a park and operate. I am kind of lucky in that Neshaminy State Park of Pennsylvania is only about 15 minutes from the office. So when the days start getting longer again, I could leave and run over to the park and do a quick activation after it. If I needed to buy another one of these radios, would I? Yes, I would. I like the orange case. I think it's really unique, but you can get a case in olive drab and light blue, and I think black, but don't quote me on that last color. I like the orange. It just seems to stand out and helps make sure you don't leave it on the bench as you walk away. So, do you have a true SDX? Hey, if so, why don't you make a note in the comments below, and if you have any particular thoughts or operating tips for the radio, go ahead and add them to that comment so we can share and continue learning about this fine little radio that Manuel and Guido put together for us. Hey, this is Mark AA3K. I'm trying to help you make the outdoors your ham shack. 73, and I'll catch you the next time.